Hey guys, Brian here with the SE Optimist. If you've watched any of my content before, you know that my philosophy more than anything is that SEO has to be as much about going for rankings as about getting the content right. After all, if you're like most businesses doing SEO, ranking is great, but what are we really trying to do SEO for? We're trying to get phone calls, we're trying to get inquiries. If it doesn't do that, it's not helping us. And so, like it or not, we have to master our content. In today's post, I wanted to go over something that comes up pretty frequently when I do SEO consulting. When I'm going into a site looking at where are missed opportunities and where are things that we can improve that not just would help us rank better, but really, assuming that a user has already landed on the site, how can we create a better impression? So in today's video, I want to go over 4 things that are probably the most common things I see that I think hold sites back. Number 1, weak titles. And by that I mean either that they're vague, they're too short, or they don't take advantage of an opportunity to reassure the reader that they're actually in the right place. Common example that you might see is a service page just called service. Even just improving it slightly to talk about your service or be specific about what kind of service we're even talking about would be an improvement, but let's go deeper than that. Say you're an event space. You rent your area out so that people can host events there. Say you used a title such as an eclectic space for your next event. You think that that's pretty clever and pretty zingy. But the problem with an approach like that is not everybody knows what eclectic means. And even for people who understand that word, what kind of events? Because the space is going to be pretty different if we're talking about a good space for a wedding versus throwing a musical concert. Is it good for both? Then you should say that, because that's definitely a huge draw of the space, that it's versatile enough to do either of those things. Just saying it's a space for an event doesn't necessarily reassure the reader, if they're looking for a place to host their wedding, that they've landed on the right place. That doesn't necessarily mean not having a stronger title than that means that they won't call you. But you can think of it like every time you miss an opportunity on a site, you're losing some likelihood of calling you points. Think of it like starting with 100, and every time you miss something, it minuses some points. Doesn't mean a person won't call you, it just means progressively with each one of these, a little bit less likely, and a little bit less likely. And with something as easy as a title, it's a great idea to go back and revisit those, because that can just really improve the likelihood that someone stays on the site. Especially if you're counting on them clicking through other pages of the site and reading more about it, they have to know they're even in the right place to begin with if they're in a hurry. And especially in the example of someone doing wedding planning, they're probably doing a lot of comparison shopping and they're looking at a lot of websites. So they've got to make a decision quickly when they're reviewing each site. And if it's not immediately clear that your event space is the right event space for them, they're probably just going to click back and go to another website where it is clearer. And so you haven't even in that case had a chance to pitch the rest of your services if they leave right away. Item number 2 that really holds sites back. Content that assumes that the reader has the same level of understanding of the topic as the owner of the business. Now this sounds obvious, but it happens a lot. One example is a website that was fairly technical. It was a device and a software that they were going to market toward doctors and medical facilities. And it was very clear when they were going at their content, since they're obviously a master of all of the fancy things that this software does. Obviously, when you're explaining something academic and complicated, say you're a scientist, if you were talking to another scientist, you wouldn't go into a lot of detail explaining something because you presume the other scientist already knows that, and if you did spend your time talking about it, he would be doing this with his hand. Get to the point. The problem is, when you're not talking to another scientist, they don't know what you're talking about. You have to pitch that to them. Even if, in their case, you're largely pitching to doctors and medical facilities, people with a medical expertise, if you think what you're marketing to them is revolutionary and it's something that they've never heard of before, then you can't go in with the presumption, well, they already know all about this and how it works. No, they don't. You just said they don't. And so the site has to begin with really breaking down clearly, what is this thing doing? What problem does it address, and why should they be excited about it, and why is it awesome for someone like them? And then get into all the other things. When I was reviewing that site, they gave a couple quick ideas of what kind of applications it might have, but it sounded more like it was about music and about people with special needs, and then out of nowhere the content started talking about doctors and medical practitioners, and it read very jarring to me, like, whoa, we were just talking about something else, now we're talking about doctors. I don't know what's happening. And even if I were a doctor, that might not make a lot of sense to me. And so you have to always go at the content for someone who doesn't necessarily understand what you're talking about, and give some time thinking about, when you've talked to your customers, what are questions they often ask, and what are things you find that you have to keep explaining to people before they're comfortable to make a purchase. And then ask yourself if the front page, especially, of your website takes those things into account, or is it making too many assumptions that they already know all that stuff. Those things too, just as much as the titles we talked about, can lead to someone hitting back and going somewhere else. If they either are confused, or maybe they get the wrong idea. Maybe they read it and they think, oh no, I get what this is about. They just have totally the wrong idea. They think your product is about something totally different, and they're like, well, I know what it is, I just don't need it. And they leave. Missed opportunity there. Item number 3, content too focused on selling features and not understanding. Now, this is an understandable one to do because they always say in copywriting is about selling benefits, not features. I would say we need to take that another level and say really good copywriting, especially on a website, is often about selling understanding and not even benefits. It's correct to say we shouldn't just have a bullet list selling a vacuum cleaner about it comes with 5 attachments and it has this many horsepower and it this and this and it can go this long without warranties. Those are a list of features and they're good to include somewhere, but they're not necessarily compelling. It is a little stronger to go into the benefits, giving use cases of specific people that could use that product and why this product is good for them. But even more than that, when I say we need to create understanding, does the site convey that you understand where they are coming from? Now, this doesn't necessarily apply to all industries depending on what you're selling, but here's a good example. I was working with a nonprofit at one point who was running a site for people in financial crisis. Their target market was somebody who has fallen way behind on their bills and is basically at that point where they're like, if I don't pay my rent in the next 30 days, I'm going to get evicted. I'm not even going to be able to buy groceries for my kids. I can't find work. What do I do? And they're completely at wit's end, probably laying awake at night staring at the ceiling with anxiety. And they can provide some financial relief for those people. The problem was, when you go to their site, it was entirely just about, we provide financial services and we're backed by these people and these people have said that we're great. And here's a bullet list of some of the different programs we have. Isn't that awesome? Call us. And I thought, maybe that works occasionally. And it's not to say that no one would call, but everything I was just saying a minute ago when they were describing who their target is, does the site talk about that? Imagine if the site opened with almost like a story saying, you're probably in a position where you haven't paid your electric bill in 2 months and you're worried. How am I going to this or that if my power gets shut off? What are my kids going to think? What will my wife think if I have to tell her we're defaulting on our mortgage? Something like that. You don't want to get too personal where it embarrasses the reader if they're in that situation, but you do have to address that a little bit so that as they're reading it, if they're in that position, they're like, yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. You get it. You know what I'm feeling. And then after you go with that part, when you say, look, we've created tailored services for people just like you, and we've helped a whole bunch of folks like you who are afraid of defaulting on their mortgages regain the sense of control of their finances and successfully get back on their feet. And here's how. That flows much more compellingly than just opening with, we can help people kind of like you, and here's how. And so going back through that content again and really trying to get in the headspace, if you're a service that sells to someone with a really specific need like that, often if it involves negative emotions, fear, anxiety, some big urgency, you should play to that. Not in a way that's manipulative, but in a way that shows them that you understand them. That's a great way to build rapport. And if you and another couple competitors are competing really hard with each other on the top of search results, that right there might be the thing that makes them call you instead of the other guy, even if the other guy ranks slightly better than you do, but he blows the content and you nail it. That's why this is so important. Last one, number 4, simply too little content. I know that one sounds basic, but that's actually very common. Very frequently when I look at websites and I'm going to do some consulting, often It's the case that the site just does not have enough content. I know that it's stylish right now, that designers want to build one-page website. Isn't this cool? It doesn't have a lot of frills. It's great for mobile. It's just one consolidated page that tells them everything you do, and it's cheap. And it's appealing to small business owners because it's cheap. Or they might have a couple pages, maybe 4. Simple front page, couple service pages, contact page. Now, the idea of only having 4 or 5 pages is okay. But the issue then is, say they have a service page, it's basically just our service, 1 or 2 paragraphs that really briefly introduces the topic, and then call us. Now, I realize why that's often done. They go in with the thinking, no one wants to read an essay. Nobody wants to be blown over with a ton of content they have to get through. If they've done a search for my service, they already know what they want. All I have to do is reassure them that I do that service, and they'll call me. Couple comments to that. 1, even if that were true, we have to rank in order for someone to even show up on our site. And my experience has been sites with that little content usually don't rank. There's just too much competition and too many good choices when Google is looking at who are the top 10 people I'm going to put on page 1 in your industry that I think have the most authority and best answer the query of this user. There's too many good options for you to be able to get away with that little content. It just does not prove authority. And so a good way to organize it is to start it almost like you would a landing page. Introduce what you're selling, a couple of really strong, compelling reasons why they should go with you and what specific experience or solution you have, and then a call to action. But then under that, you can go into much more detail. A way that I find is really successful for this is think of typical questions that they often ask when you're on the phone with them, when you're working the deal, or when you do a search for the service that you provide. You notice about a quarter of the way down the search results, Google will show the people also ask, and it'll give a couple of pop-outs. That's great for ideas on other things people often want to know when they're searching for your service. Make sure to include those things with subheadings. Make those questions subheadings like H2s, and then put content under it. If you aim to do about 200 to 500 words of explanation under each of those questions, and you have at least 2 or 3 of those questions, you'll be well over 1,000 words in no time, and it'll be a lot less difficult to write than you probably thought it would be. And that degree of content helps you rank not only because it's long enough that Google will say anybody who writes this level of content stands a better chance of really knowing what they're talking about than a guy who only writes a paragraph, but because you have all those subheadings in it, you're also reinforcing to Google, I not only talk about this topic, I also am addressing all of these questions people have, and I really know my stuff. And because Google is an answer engine, when it sees that you're answering all these questions and one of your competitors doesn't, that actually makes you more of an authority, and that really helps. And if you're going to rely on blog posts to reinforce your content, don't arbitrarily feel like you have to always write an essay. Not every one of them needs to be super long, but in the same token, don't think that just writing a bunch of 150-word briefs is going to work, because it's not. Not unless they get a ton of reshares and a ton of links, which they're less likely to do if they're that short. Sometimes it's appropriate if someone's asking a simple question like, does a blue t-shirt go well with a white hat? And if you can answer that as a fashion person in 2 paragraphs, yes or no, it doesn't, and here's why, bam, bam, and it's done, cool. But if somebody's looking for something complex, like, what things should I be thinking about if I'm considering remodeling my deck? There's no way you can really give a good answer to that question in a paragraph or 2. So you're going to have to go more at length with that to really provide value. It's going to be time consuming, but it will help you rank better for those things. And when a reader ends up on the site, you being the one that really answers the questions and really makes it clear that you have their best interest at heart and you know all this stuff, especially again, if one of your competitors, let's go with that deck remodeling example, let's say one of your competitors just really quickly talks about remodeling decks. Yeah, we can do it, bam, bam, bam. Some people say that we're cool, buy our stuff. But then you're the one going into all this detail about, well, you know, a lot of people don't think about this, and you definitely want to plan this out, and these things often come up, and you want to be conscious of blam, bam, 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 and this is how we help people navigate that, and because we're able to do that, now it's a link to all of your testimonials. Here are people that we've really helped who think that our service has been really valuable. That leaves a person with the impression, yeah, I'm going to go with this guy because he's seen it all. They anticipate everything. Nothing's going to go wrong if I hire them because they've thought of everything. Even if it was true that the other guy is just as skilled as you are, and if they called that guy, probably nothing will go wrong with him either. That's not clear. We have to make it clear. The perception that we create with the content matters. In the show Mad Men, at one point when he's talking up a cigarette ad, Don Draper pitches the idea of talking about how their tobacco is toasted. And the tobacco executive says, yeah, but everybody does that. That's part of how making cigarettes works. And he said, but nobody talks about it. So you're going to mention that yours is toasted. And because you're the only one that mentions that yours is toasted, it's going to seem like some really unique concept. And it's going to make yours seem special. And that's going to pull a lot of attention toward you. That same concept is what I'm talking about here with addressing questions and just really reinforcing that you are the one people should trust because you have their interests at heart. Doing those things will usually give you enough content on the site to rank much better, especially if you've nailed the titles. And it also just improves the engagement you get once people are on the site. Because like I said in the beginning, you can get as many visits as you want from search traffic. If no one calls you every month, it doesn't matter. I hope this was helpful for you guys. Please like and leave a comment if you have specific questions below. And otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video.